In the bleak winter of the year 2862, Marines, hailing from the mighty empire, dared to tread upon the untamed lands of the Han Federation. These were territories not found in the glossy pages of any geography book. The land, a remote corner of an already desolate world, bore witness to a fierce skirmish that saw hundreds of souls leaving their mortal coil. The empires, stubborn in their arrogance, barely whispered of the event. The bureaucratic channels saw it conveniently filed away as nothing more than a border incident. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't a mere squabble. It was an orchestrated dance of death, one that yielded a bounty worth every drop of blood spilled. The shadowy heroes of this dance were the Sea Force from the Third Group, a clandestine sector of the Marine Special Forces, adept at wetland operations. As the dark veil of night lingered, we embarked on the destroyer named T.N.S. Rosencolis. With the morning's first light, our powerboats met the chilling embrace of the open waters. The comforting silhouette of our destroyer faded as we ventured east, its gargantuan magnetic guns promising protection, a sentinel watching from afar. Salty mists clung to our blue uniforms as we sped towards destiny. Recent satellite probes had discovered an enigma on this planet. Hidden amongst the towering ice mountains lay a town. It wasn't just the industrialized monotony that the modern world was accustomed to. The heart of this town held vast facilities, secrets cloaked by fortified walls. Cryptic messages snared by Navy intelligence spoke in hushed tones of unsettling shipments. The world's peacekeepers whispered in dimly lit rooms, suspecting this town housed labs dedicated to the sinister arts of chemical warfare. The world's unwritten codes deemed even the mere act of developing such weapons as hostile. So when the Premier General called the strike without the fanfare of a formal war announcement, I felt no surprise, only dread. The media's barking dogs could howl all they wanted. I just wished our intel had been correct. Had it been just a weapons factory, our task would have been straightforward. In the numbing cold, we pulled our boats ashore. We knew backup was on its way, a brigade with its roaring motors and the promise of aerial firepower. The Empire was leaving nothing to chance. Under my command, the 8 of us moved in synchrony, 2 groups moving in a dance of war. A surprise encounter with the enemy barely broke our stride. The echoing gunshots, the synchronized movement, and then the chilling realization. The enemy's uniforms were tainted, but not with blood. Radiation. The ever-logical specialist Hal Brooks quickly reasoned. This land's rich in radioactive minerals. It's probably just residual radiation from mining. His voice did little to quell the rapid ticking of my Geiger counter. I found myself contemplating whether we were in the midst of a nuclear hellscape. Brooks, the resident expert, added, "Decades ago, Weissland Corporation found an abundance of thorium here. That's the treasure everyone's after." I was in no mood for a debate, especially not with someone flaunting a certification in chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear operations. With the cold gnawing at our bones, we journeyed on, surrounded by an eerie silence. The very ground beneath our boots seemed to hold secrets, muffling our steps. The landscape was disconcerting, like a vivid dream pulled straight from a twisted mind. And as we approached our objective, I saw them. Colossal structures, silent sentinels harboring dark truths. Dawn was chased away by the roars of incoming fighter bombers. The symphony of war began in earnest. As the Marines engaged in their fiery ballet on the streets, we readied ourselves for our clandestine mission, determined to unearth the shadows that this town held. Moving deeper into the archaeological site, the descending pathway began to wind, displaying ancient reliefs on both sides. They depicted a species resembling the humanoid form, but with subtle differences. The beings were taller, with longer limbs, and their heads crowned with feathery tufts. These reliefs seemed to narrate a story, one of exploration, discovery, and eventual exile or self-seclusion. As we ventured further, the temperature seemed to drop significantly with each step, emphasizing the unnatural aura of the place. I turned to Brooks and asked, Do you think the temperature is naturally this cold, or could there be some sort of technology at play? He replied, brushing a frosted hand over one of the walls. It's hard to say, Staff Sergeant. These structures are incredibly old, yet the cold seems almost purposeful. Maybe it's a preservation method. Whatever the case, we should be cautious. The winding path soon opened to a vast cavern. The walls of the cavern glittered with what appeared to be minerals, casting prismatic reflections as our flashlight beams played over them. At the center of the cavern stood an intricate pedestal with an object that seemed to be encased in a shimmering field of energy. Approaching it cautiously, we realized that the object was a device of some kind, its purpose unknown. On its surface were the same glyphs we had seen on the tower walls. Beside the pedestal lay a half-open journal, likely left by one of the Han researchers. With my limited understanding of traditional Chinese, I deciphered mentions of the device emitting a strange energy signature when they tried to interface with it. Private Jensen, our tech specialist, took a closer look. I think this might be some sort of data storage or possibly a communication device. It's far beyond our understanding, but I might be able to extract something if I can link it to our portable analyzer. I don't know if that's a good idea, Corporal Lai whispered, her eyes scanning the cavern's perimeter. This place feels alive in a way. We should tread carefully. Deciding to err on the side of caution, I ordered Jensen to only attempt a passage scan without interfacing directly. The scan was slow but steadily processed the ancient technology's data. We waited, our breath visible in the cold air, and every small noise echoing in the vastness of the cavern. After what felt like hours, the scanner beeped. Jensen pulled up the screen, displaying a holographic map of the galaxy, with coordinates leading to another distant star system. Text accompanied the map, translating roughly to our exiled brethren, may you find solace among the stars. We leave this as a guide back home. The realization hit us hard. This wasn't just an archaeological site. It was a beacon or a guidepost for those who had been banished from their homeland, offering them a way back. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life with Canada's voice, urgent and panicked. Contact. Han forces are returning in large numbers. We won't be able to hold them off for long. The urgency of the situation snapped us back to reality. Time to leave, I yelled. We began our ascent, clutching the retrieved data and the hope that this discovery, while complicating our initial mission, might provide humanity with a new understanding of our place in the universe. But first, we had to survive the immediate threat and escape the encroaching Han forces. The stifling, dense atmosphere felt even more suffocating as we ran, the soft glow of the blue floor barely providing enough illumination for us to navigate. Each breath was heavy, as though we were dragging the weight of the realization of our perilous situation with every inhalation. The distant hum of machinery that we had initially heard now seemed like a distant echo, overshadowed by the sickening, rhythmic wet sounds of the pursuing slug-like creatures. Turning a corner, I caught a quick glance over my shoulder, and the sight was something straight out of a nightmare. The writhing, slug-like entities seemed to move with a singular, horrifying purpose, their uneven flesh glistening in the eerie light of the blue floor. Their vestigial limbs reached out, as if seeking something to anchor onto. The empty, dark sockets on their partially exposed skulls seemed to be filled with an insatiable hunger. It was an image that would be forever etched in my mind. Keep moving. Don't stop. Brooks yelled over the deafening shrieks of the creatures. The sheer number of them made the situation even more dire. It felt like every turn we took, every corridor we entered, they were there, spilling over each other, their sheer numbers seemingly endless. Suddenly, I remembered the chem-light sticks that the researchers had used to mark their path. Pulling one from my belt, I cracked it, causing it to glow brightly. Throwing it behind us, I hoped the sudden brightness would momentarily confuse or deter the creatures. For a brief moment, the creatures hesitated, the light creating a brief barrier between us and them. "We need a plan. We can't keep running blindly," shouted Miller, one of my team members, as we continued our frantic dash. I know, I replied, my mind racing. If we can find a choke point, a narrow passageway or room, we might be able to bottleneck them, buy ourselves some time. As we continued our sprint, the labyrinthine structure seemed to mock us with its countless twists and turns. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Every corner we turned, every room we sprinted through, felt like a gamble. Would it lead to safety or a dead end? Would we find a way out or become trapped with those horrifying entities? The radiation count on my Geiger counter continued its ominous tick, each reading higher than the last. I was acutely aware that even if we escaped these creatures, the radiation exposure might still prove lethal. We need to get back to the surface, warn the others, I panted, trying to muster as much authority and calm as I could, even though internally I was gripped by fear. Suddenly, up ahead, I spotted a familiar sight. The glowing blue energy field with the square hole leading to the rope ladder. It was our way out. With renewed vigor, we raced towards it, the creatures hot on our heels. As we neared the opening, I could see the rope ladder swaying slightly, a beacon of hope in this sea of darkness. Go, 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 I yelled, urging my team to climb as quickly as possible. The creatures were closing in, their enraged shrieks echoing through the cavernous space. As we ascended, I could feel their presence just below us, their grotesque forms writhing and contorting, eager to ensnare us in their grasp. It was a race against time, one we couldn't afford to lose. We reached the ladder and started frantically climbing back up, weighed down by about 40 pounds of body armor, rifles, and ammunition. Given the hefty gear and the perilous situation, the climb was anything but effortless. The very creatures we had tried to escape were right on our heels, breathing down our necks. Once the last Marine managed to pull himself to the top, we commenced the task of hoisting the ladder back up, attempting to sever their only known means of pursuit. However, these creatures, surprisingly agile in their movements, gripped onto it before we could completely retract it. They started descending it by contorting their gelatinous bodies around the rungs in an eerily precise manner. Our two riflemen pulled with all their might, while Brooks and I let out a hail of bullets down upon them. Even as the bullets rained, our combined firepower seemed insufficient to halt their relentless advance. In desperation, I reached into my gear, pulled out a fragmentation grenade, yanked the pin, and let it tumble down the gaping hole. The ensuing explosion sent a huge plume of stone dust and debris upwards through the opening, temporarily blinding us. As the dust settled, the once taut ladder was now slack, its bottom end coated in the same putrid, necrotic substance that covered the creatures. We knew we had to secure our position, and quickly. We need to find something to barricade this entrance with, I urged, scanning the area for anything that might serve the purpose. But after that, then what? Brooks shot back, his voice echoing the anxiety and uncertainty we all felt. I'm thinking, maybe I'll call it into command, see if we could request some heavy artillery, perhaps even get the Navy to napalm this entire site. I speculated, trying to devise a plan on the fly. Brooks retorted skeptically, and what are you going to tell them? That we found some radiation-loving mutant slug creatures underground. You think they'll even believe such a far-fetched tale? Enough, I exclaimed. Help me with this panel. I gestured towards a piece of steel shielding, hoping we could use it to temporarily barricade our position. But as we began to lift it, a startling discovery awaited us. A young woman with jet-black hair, clad in a lab coat, was hiding behind it, taking refuge in a small, concealed crawl space. She appeared equally surprised, her eyes widening in shock as they met ours. In a split-second assessment, I noticed the distinctive bulge in her lab coat pocket, the unmistakable outline of a concealed firearm. You're not hand military, she remarked, eyeing our uniforms with suspicion. Who are you? That's not the priority right now, I responded tersely. Do you know what lies beneath that platform? She nodded slowly. Yes, I do. And I suspect I understand it far better than any of you. Ignoring the hint of arrogance in her voice, I gestured for her to continue. She introduced herself as Dr. Sholin Tom, a PhD materials chemist working for the Army Research Group. She began detailing the history and nature of these creatures, drawing connections between them and the angelic carvings we had encountered in the tombs below. She explained how the angelic beings and these slug-like creatures were essentially the same species, with the latter being a deviant group that had over time developed an insatiable craving for radionuclides, treating them akin to drugs. This addiction, coupled with their unique ability to sense gamma radiation, explained their relentless pursuit of us. As Dr. Tom went on, a horrifying realization dawned upon Brooks. "Our long-range radios," he uttered, pointing towards his backpack. "They use nuclear thermoelectric batteries powered by the heat of plutonium decay. That's what they're after." Dr. Tom nodded grimly. "And it's not just your radios. These creatures, if let loose, will hunt down every source of radiation they can find, from nuclear reactors that power vast sections of human space to the very starships we travel in." Understanding the magnitude of the potential catastrophe we were facing, a resolution formed in my mind. "We have one chance to contain this," I declared. "Dr. Tom, we need to know what to do." She proposed a daring plan to repair the malfunctioning cryostasis machinery that had kept these creatures dormant for millennia. By overloading it with electricity, we could potentially deprive the tombs of air, suffocating everything within. But it required venturing back down, confronting those abominations, and manually connecting the town's electric grid to the machinery. Realizing the high stakes, Brooks nodded in agreement. "All right then. We venture down, fight our way to the machinery, and electrify the entire chamber. But we'll need high-voltage cables and a ton of ammunition." Before we could finalize our plan, I received a transmission from Corporal Canetta. It was time to rally our forces, arm ourselves to the teeth, and face the lurking horrors below. "Don't get caught in the crossfire. Take the long way if you have to. Do you want some milk and sugar too, honey?" One of the soldiers quipped sarcastically. "What do you think, smartass? Get the gear. Time isn't on our side," I retorted sharply. Acknowledging the command, the response came, "Copy. We'll be on the move and back in less than an hour." True to their word, Corporal Canetta's team returned efficiently with all the ammunition and equipment we had requested. They meticulously laid it in a neat pile on the ground, maintaining distance so as to not risk contamination. They promptly went back to their established posts, ensuring the door's security. With a brief moment of respite before the mission commenced, the men instinctively sought a moment of calm, grounding themselves mentally and emotionally. It was as if an invisible veil of serenity descended upon the group, fostering a fleeting yet potent belief that everything might just turn out fine. Brooks, always the prepared one, distributed iodine and Prussian blue tablets among us. These would aid in neutralizing any absorbed radioactive elements from our system. Understanding the gravity of what lay ahead, I felt a collective prayer was in order. Although it wasn't mandatory, every single one of us, including Dr. Tam, whose spiritual inclinations I wasn't quite certain of, united in a close-knit circle. We placed arms over one another's shoulders, heads respectfully bowed. Addressing a power greater than ourselves, my words were straightforward. "We find ourselves here due to your will. Every challenge and triumph in our lives has prepared us for this very moment. We believe in your wisdom and trust that you will guide us through this mission. Though fear resides in our hearts, we are honored to confront this threat. Guide us, stand with us, and let's ensure these abominations are vanquished." "Hurrah! Marines don't die," Brooks exclaimed, echoing the sentiment of the group. "They simply regroup in hell." Over the radio, Corporal Canada chimed in, offering his encouragement. "Best of luck down there. Make every shot count." "My father dedicated his life to managing a wasteland electric plant," Brooks revealed, a note of pride in his voice. "For generations, my family has been ensuring that the lights never go out. Today, that legacy is my responsibility." With a sense of purpose renewing our determination, we reloaded our weapons and cautiously made our way back to the ominous tower. As we stepped onto the blue energy field, a chilling realization hit us. The vast majority of those creatures were still in cryostasis. The horde that had been unleashed earlier was merely a fraction. If awakened entirely, their numbers could potentially dwarf the human population spread across the solar system. Upon reaching the breach in the force field, we noticed the long rope ladder, discarded and unused. It was evident that the radioactive creatures had desperately piled onto one another, trying to climb upwards. My Geiger counter didn't delay in alerting me to the escalating radiation levels. Their tenacity was undeniable, if not commendable. Time is crucial, I emphasized, hurling a grenade towards the accumulating mass of creatures. The radiation will intensify. We need to act swiftly. The explosion cleared the immediate threat, creating a passage for us. We swiftly descended, keeping a vigilant eye on our radiation monitors. Dr. Tam, clutching a makeshift map, guided us through the labyrinthine corridors, with our formation designed to shield her from the creatures. Utilizing the marine maneuver warfare doctrine, we strategically advanced, sometimes dividing our forces to encircle and neutralize threats. In these underground catacombs, my firearm's fully automatic setting became an unexpected asset, aiding us in handling the relentless onslaught of these creatures. Each corner we turned, every room we entered, seemed a replica of the previous, making Dr. Tam's guidance invaluable. Our progression was evident as the ambient temperature dropped, resulting in visible breaths and condensation on our weapons. Dr. Tam, all the while, diligently unspooled the electric cables, preparing for the final phase of our mission. But as we journeyed deeper, the creatures became increasingly aggressive and numerous. Our gas masks became both a blessing and a curse. They shielded us from the repugnant stench, but made breathing laborious during our frantic run. Finally, Dr. Tam signaled our proximity to our destination. However, what awaited us inside the machinery room was the stuff of nightmares. A grotesque amalgamation of researchers and creatures had fused into a singular pulsating mass, enveloping the machinery. Struggling to comprehend the horror before us, I stammered, "Why? Why has this happened?" "They're draining the facility's power. They want access to the nuclear core," Dr. Tam said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. Beside the monstrosity, etched symbols offered a chilling insight. Interpreting the glyphs, Dr. Tam translated, "Our God, the ideal and pursuit of pleasure." Her voice was laden with disgust and revulsion, mirroring the collective sentiment of our group. It was completely beyond me why those aliens, who once belonged to an angelic race with an appreciation for beauty that was very much in line with ours, would take such a drastic turn. Why would they begin to worship this grotesque, decaying monstrosity? Such a tragic waste, I mused. The overwhelming sense of disgust initially gave way to a burning anger, only to be replaced by an immense sadness. I felt the weight of despair, thinking about those lost souls, blindly hurtling towards self-destruction, elevating the worst among them to an exalted position of an idol. Suddenly, my radio sputtered to life. Corporal Kaneda's voice, fraught with the unmistakable noise of gunfire in the background, broke the heavy silence. "Sergeant, the Hand's army is back with a vengeance. You need to return, and fast." The distinctive sound of his light machine gun unleashed in rapid bursts mingled with the incoming bullets, forming a cacophony of battle. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I turned to my team. "We need to shut down these air intakes. If we damage the piping, the ventilation system will trigger a sealing mechanism for repairs. That ought to suffocate these creatures." As Brooks and Dr. Tam set about connecting the power cables, I reached for my last grenade, intending to blow the piping. As I approached the main reactor creature, a multitude of voices emanated from it. "Wait. Your civilization's days are numbered. We will devour it just as we've done with countless others." The eerie chorus of absorbed researchers spoke in unison, their words a chilling reminder of our stakes. Trying to keep my focus, I shot back, "You're wrong." But before I could act, a massive appendage lunged at me, knocking both me and the grenade aside. I grappled with the creature, using my rifle as an improvised weapon, each of us trying to gain the upper hand. As the beast gained ground, knocking my rifle away, I drew my bayonet, preparing to go hand to hand with this monstrous entity. My team, hearing the commotion, rushed to my aid, unleashing a hail of bullets on the creature. Seizing the distraction, I scrambled to retrieve the grenade, pulling its pin and hurling it at the piping. An explosion ensued, and as the dust settled, we could hear the system sealing off. The creature let out an agonized scream, sensing its impending doom. Brooks, connecting the cables, shouted triumphantly, "From my God to yours, let there be light." The room was immediately bathed in blinding arcs of electricity. The alarms wailed louder, and a sudden depressurization caused our ears to pop, making the atmosphere grow thin. We knew we had to evacuate, and fast. Navigating the twisted catacombs, with our ammunition running dangerously low, we were driven by a singular goal: to rendezvous with Canada and provide support. Emerging from the underground, the thinner atmosphere was immediately palpable, but there was no time to recover. The distant sound of gunfire was our beacon. Upon nearing the entrance, I caught sight of Canada and his team, their positions fortified with makeshift barricades. Joining forces, we intensified the gunfire, creating an impenetrable wall of bullets. In the midst of the firefight, Dr. Tam's actions took me by surprise. She stood firmly by our side, taking aim at her fellow countrymen. As the battle waned, a temporary lull enveloped us, punctuated only by the distant sounds of battle. We waited, guns at the ready, for the next wave. Just when the tension seemed unbearable, a shout came, "Friendlies coming in. Check fire." 4 more Marines rushed in, their uniforms a stark contrast to ours, decorated with a myriad of green and brown strokes, reminiscent of a Van Gogh masterpiece. The weight of the situation hit us then. Despite our differences, at that moment, humanity stood united against a common threat. 32nd Spaceborne Winged Huzzes, Staff Sergeant Andrus at your service, I declared, my chest swelling with pride. And I am Sergeant Victor Reiston. We've come to provide assistance. What have we missed? Well, Sergeant Reiston, the tale is quite a roller coaster. It's something you find hard to believe unless you were right here witnessing it. I replied with a weary smile. I extended a gesture, wanting to shake his hand in gratitude, but there were pressing matters to attend to first. With anxiety mounting, I turned to Dr. Tam. "Are you absolutely certain this method will work?" I questioned, pouring bucketfuls of water over myself. She nodded with determination. "Yes, we've carried out extensive tests on this kind of sterilization in the labs. It'll be extremely uncomfortable, but I promise you'll make it through." With a heavy sigh, I prepped myself. "All right, let's get this over with," connecting the electrodes to my wet helmet and boots. With a firm flick of her wrist, Dr. Tam activated the switch, and a staggering 12,000 volts surged throughout my body. The sensation was excruciating, with every muscle contracting violently. I felt as if my skin was being swarmed by a multitude of fire ants, each delivering a burning sting. I tried to focus on the purpose, on ridding my body of any traces of those repugnant slug creatures. It felt like an eternity, but those agonizing 5 seconds finally came to an end. We emerged from it knowing that the immediate threat was eradicated. The containment structure's entrance was flooded with the golden hues of the afternoon sun. More Marines poured in, each taking in the scene with a mix of astonishment and pride. As the adrenaline waned, I felt a pang of melancholy, wondering if anything would ever match the exhilaration of this mission and the profound difference we'd made. The doctor and I found a moment of respite, perching on an ammo crate. We observed the parade of armored vehicles pass by, bearing scars from the fierce battle they'd just partaken in. Large caliber guns, stained with residues from prolonged usage, indicated the intensity of the earlier skirmish. Breaking our silent contemplation, Dr. Tam spoke, her voice trembling slightly. I want to defect. Taken aback, I replied, but I don't even know your homeland. What makes you so certain? She sighed deeply. Things in my country have never been straightforward. You have a way with words, Staff Sergeant Andrus. You convinced me. A small smile played on her lips. Would you take me to your home? I paused, taking in the enormity of her request. Above us, a distant sun shone, a testament to the vastness of the universe and humanity's fledgling steps amongst the stars. Our recent discoveries were bound to shape our destiny. However, the narrative constructed for the masses was considerably different. They were fed a story of a botched intelligence operation at a benign archaeological site, necessitating a rescue by another unit. Yet, in my possession, I had both a defector and a loving fiancé to testify to the truth. Although agreements were reached and visible actions were taken, the looming questions about those slug creatures and the civilization that birthed them remained. The very notion that an advanced race could find pleasure in sheer destruction, to the extent of forsaking their own well-being, haunted me. Were their allies truly paralyzed by political stalemates, preventing effective intervention? The most unsettling question, though, was a reflection on our own species. As I pondered the events and the choices made by the slug creatures, I couldn't help but wonder, are we truly any different?